But first, and speaking of double standards, it's no secret the ABC, our national broadcast, has been leading the virus scare campaign and been cheering on the very harshest bans. And why not? Not a single ABC journalist loses their job from these bans. But there's also something about authoritarian governments, I think, that really appeals to the modern left and to the ABC, and that's why our supposedly impartial national broadcast has been defending the most authoritarian premier in the country, Victoria's Daniel Andrews, the man who cancelled this parliament, locked up millions of people in their homes for 23 hours a day, handcuffed pregnant mothers, even handcuffed grandmothers out in the park, banned any home visits for months now, and has even imposed a curfew. Now, as I have shown again and again, this lockdown is a disastrous overreaction, the world's toughest and longest lockdown today. And many doctors and psychologists and economists say it's caused far more harm than good. Why didn't the government just do the basics, but properly, trace the infectious, quarantine the infected, protect the old? It didn't. It stuffed all that up, and more than 750 Australians have died as a result. Now, the fact that the Premier chose, instead of just doing his job properly, such a brutally and unnecessarily authoritarian way to fight this virus, so destructive, has shocked me. And it shocked me even more at learning today that 2/3 of Victorians supposedly support what is done. What does that say? And in fact, I'm so shocked that to try to warn my fellow citizens, to make them wake up to what is really going on here, I have mocked Andrews as Dictator Dan on the show and in my columns. Whoa, seems I triggered the ABC. Among all the things that are going on as Victoria slides into what's starting to look like a police state, of all the things, the vast overreactions, the fibbing by the Premier about what he knew and when, and all this kind of stuff, and journalists beating it all up, and of course the disastrous decisions made by this government. Of all this, it's this mocking of Daniel Andrews. That's the one thing that is just too much for the ABC's Media Watch show to bear.
The beleaguered Premier is typically drawn by the Australian's cartoonist, Johannes Leek, in Chinese Mao cap with communist red star to drive home that dictator theme, which Andrew Bolt was riffing on last week in this column about the cult of Dan, suggesting Victorians were happily licking the Premier's jackboots and, quote, acting like abused wives who kiss the hands that beat them. Nasty stuff.
Nasty stuff. What a tender little petal that man is. I tell you what's nasty, Mr. Paul Barry. I'll tell you what's really nasty. It is something that the ABC refuses to see or to criticise, a loss of liberties that is so serious that even Julian Burnside, the extreme far-left celebrity, the former Greens candidate, the Abbott hater, the Morrison hater, has now been forced to join me, even me, in protesting as he is, as the head of Liberty Victoria. It is so nasty and dictatorial, this government, that today 18 QCs and ex-judges have written a letter of protest to all Victorian politicians about something I raised yesterday in my column and on this show last night. They say what I did. They are deeply concerned by Daniel Andrews now trying to get Parliament to pass laws that let him appoint anyone at all. Ethnic bosses have been suggested, public servants, private security guards, who knows, and give them the power to imprison fellow Victorians who haven't even broken the law. These new officials will be able to imprison you indefinitely on just the suspicion that you might be a serious health risk and won't stay in quarantine. No trial, no court, no proof needed. How could a democracy tolerate this? And how could the ABC say that calling the leader responsible for this outrage a dictator? He's a dictator. Oh, you're the nasty person. How about looking at the bloke doing all this to us? Paul Barry, reminds me that some dictators are famous for at least loving their dogs, or lapdogs in this case.